The Concordat didn't die in a day. Empires that old don't collapse quickly, but the cracks spread wider every month. The Vexatorian Empire sealed its borders and refused all contact with the outside galaxy. The Kyle hierarchy split into traditionalists who clung to the old ways, and reformers who wanted change. Dozens of worker species simply stopped following orders. They didn't rebel violently. They just quietly stopped cooperating, and the refugees kept coming. Ships arrived daily at human space. Thousands became millions. Species that had hidden from the Concordat for generations emerged from the shadows. Populations that had been enslaved rose up and fled. The discarded, the rejected, the unwanted. They all headed toward the one place in the galaxy that said yes. Earth's new president, a man named Seo Jun, stood before the planetary government with a radical proposal. We can't handle this alone. We don't have the space or resources, but we can build something that can. He showed them the plans. A megastructure unlike anything humanity had attempted before. The Sanctuary Ring, a massive habitat built around a resource-rich star at the edge of human space. Designed to house billions. Designed not just by humans, but by every species that wanted to contribute. This is insane, one representative said. The engineering alone would take decades. The cost would bankrupt us. If we do it alone, Seo Jun agreed, but we're not alone anymore. The Thran had already calculated the construction sequence. The Pixen had mapped every resource node in the system. The Yulkar had organized work crews that could coordinate efforts across 3 simultaneous projects. The Velnari regenerative technology could repair damage faster than it occurred. And humans? Humans tied it all together with management skills learned from building colonies across dozens of worlds. Construction began 6 months after the Battle of Haven's Gate. The first segments were rough, experimental. Mistakes were made. A Thran calculation error nearly crashed an entire section. Pixen navigators got lost in the superstructure's complexity. Human engineers argued with Yulkar architects about design philosophy. But they learned. They adapted. An architect named Ji-hoon emerged as the project's lead designer. He was young, barely 30, but he had a gift for visualizing how different species' needs could coexist. His designs included crystal gardens for the Thran, low-gravity zones for the Pixen, and triple household structures for the Yulkar. We're not building human habitats with refugee additions, he explained in a broadcast. We're building something new, a place where every species' architecture influences the whole, where the structure itself is a blend. Bomb, now managing multiple sanctuary colonies, watched the sanctuary ring take shape with satisfaction. Her original colony on New Sol had become a model. Humans and refugees worked side by side, growing food that fed dozens of worlds. She had proven it could work on a small scale. Now they were proving it on a massive one. Ambassador Ji-woo spent her days negotiating with fracturing Concordat factions. Some wanted trade deals. Others wanted to join the growing Sanctuary Alliance. A few still threatened war, but their threats rang hollow. The galaxy had seen what happened when the Concordat tried to intimidate the Alliance. Carthen, surprisingly, had chosen asylum. He lived on New Sol now, working in the fields alongside the people he had once tried to kill. Bomb had given him that job personally. You wanted to destroy us, she told him the first day. Now you're going to help us grow. He worked in silence for weeks, his reptilian body struggling with labor it was never designed for. But slowly he began to understand. The Velnari he worked beside didn't hate him. They just expected him to do his share. The humans treated him no differently than anyone else. One day a young Velnari girl approached him. She was maybe 8 years old by human standards. She held out a flower she had grown. For you, she said simply. Welcome to New Sol. Carthen, who had commanded fleets and ordered genocide, stood holding a flower given by a child of a species he had tried to exterminate. Something inside him broke, or maybe something finally healed. He became one of the Alliance's strongest advocates. He appeared on broadcast across former Concordat space telling his story. How he had served evil thinking it was order. How he had learned there was a better way. I cannot undo what I did, he said in one famous speech. I killed millions following Concordat orders. I carry that weight, but I can choose differently now. Every person who served the Concordat we can stop being what we were. We can become something better. His words reached deep into Concordat space. Soldiers deserted. Administrators resigned. Entire species declared independence and requested alliance membership. The sanctuary ring grew. Segment by segment, it took shape around its star. A ribbon of habitats, each section different, each section home to different species living side by side. Hana, who had started as a young xenobiologist excited to meet new species, now ran the Alliance's Research Institute. It was located on the Ring, a place where scientists from dozens of species collaborated. They weren't just studying each other anymore. They were discovering things none of them could have found alone. The Thren understand quantum mechanics in ways our computers can't match, she explained in a lecture, but they need human intuition to know which questions to ask. The Velnari regenerative medicine only works because we combined it with human genetic techniques. The Pixin gravitational senses let us build engines human physics said were impossible. Everything builds on everything else. Young scientists, human and refugee alike, worked together in her institute. A human named Sunmi collaborated with a Thren on quantum communication. A Velnari doctor taught human medical students while learning human surgical techniques. Knowledge flowed in all directions. On Earth, Young-Soo watched these developments from quiet retirement. He had been wrong and he had admitted it, but the guilt remained. He spent his time now working with human refugees from failed colonies, teaching them skills to integrate with the Alliance, trying to make up for the damage his words had caused. One day, Daehyun visited him. The captain had become something of a legend, the man who first opened the door. He found Young-Soo in a refugee processing center, helping a family fill out settlement forms. "I wanted to apologize," Daehyun said. Young-Soo looked up, surprised. "For what?" "I'm the one who tried to stop you. For making it look easy. It wasn't. Every day I wondered if I was destroying humanity's future. I had nightmares about human children starving because we gave food to refugees. You voiced fears a lot of people felt. But you were right. I got lucky. If the refugees hadn't brought such useful skills, if the integration had failed, if the Concordat had been stronger, a lot of things could have gone wrong." Being right doesn't mean I wasn't scared. They talked for hours. Two men who had stood on opposite sides of history's turning point, trying to understand how they had gotten there. The sanctuary ring was completed 5 years after construction began. It had taken a fortune in resources, the labor of billions, and cooperation across dozens of species. The opening ceremony was broadcast across the galaxy. President Seo Jun stood at the dedication, his silver hair reflecting the ring's lights. "This is not a human achievement," he said. "It's not a Velnari achievement or a Thren achievement. It's proof that we're stronger together than apart. That diversity isn't weakness. It's the only real strength." The first families moved in, humans and Velnari sharing apartment blocks, Thren and Pixin in adjacent crystal gardens and low-gravity zones, Yulkar triple households next to human single-family homes. Children of different species played together in parks designed for all of them. It wasn't perfect. Arguments happened. Cultural misunderstandings caused friction. Some humans resented sharing resources. Some refugees struggled to adapt to mixed communities. But they worked through it. Because the alternative was going back to the old way. Back to purity and separation and weakness. 50 years after the Velnari first arrived at Ganymede Station, the Sanctuary Alliance controlled a quarter of the galaxy. Not through conquest, but through choice. Species joined because they saw something they wanted to be part of. Daehyun was an old man now, but he still lived on Ganymede Station. It had become a historical site, the place where it all began. Tourists from dozens of species visited to see the docking bay where the first refugees arrived. He sat in the old command center with Venlas. She was ancient now, even by Velnari standards, but she had lived to see her people not just survive but thrive. "We are everywhere now," she said, her voice soft with wonder. "Velnari children grow up never knowing exile. They think of themselves as citizens of the Alliance, not refugees." "Is that good or bad?" Daehyun asked. "Good, very good. They should not carry our trauma. They should build their own future." Below them, in the station's gardens, they could see children playing. Human, Velnari, Thren, Yulkar, Pixin, and a dozen other species. They didn't think about which species they were. They just played. Sujin was an ambassador now, representing the first generation born in the Alliance. She had grown up between species, belonging fully to none and partially to all. She traveled across the galaxy, speaking about cooperation and integration. On a stage before thousands, she told her story. "My people were cast aside by the cosmos. We were going to die in space, forgotten." Carthan's fleet arrived at New Sol expecting surrender. What they found was a surprise. The colony hadn't run. Instead, ships from across human space had gathered there. 60 human warships, yes, but also hundreds of civilian vessels. Freighters, colony ships, even personal transports. They hung in orbit around New Sol like a mismatched fleet. No two ships alike. They're going to fight with cargo haulers? Carthan's tactical officer sounded amused. This will be over in minutes. But Carthan felt uneasy. Something was wrong. The human formations didn't make sense. Ships were positioned in clusters that violated every tactical doctrine he knew. Begin the attack, he ordered. The first wave of concordate ships moved forward. Perfect formations, perfectly coordinated. They had done this 1,000 times before against 100 different species. Then the human ships moved, and Carthan understood what he was facing. They weren't human ships anymore. They were something new. A freighter piloted by a human and a Pixan navigator dove through the concordate formation, threading between ships in spaces that shouldn't have been navigable. The Pixan could see gravity wells like humans saw light. They knew where every ship was by the space it curved around it. Concordate ships fired, but the freighter was already gone, appearing somewhere else impossible. A warship crewed by humans and Thren opened fire. The Thren had calculated the battle probabilities before the first shot was fired. They knew where concordate ships would be before those ships knew themselves. Every human weapon hit vital systems with impossible accuracy. Evasive maneuvers, Carthan ordered. His ships scattered, but the humans were ready. Yulkar crew members coordinated the defense, their 3-part minds processing 3 aspects of battle simultaneously. One tracked incoming fire, one managed shields, one plotted counters. They worked with human crew in perfect harmony, each complementing the other's weaknesses. A concordate cruiser managed to land a devastating hit on a human destroyer. The ship's hull tore open. Atmosphere vented. Crew died, but the Velnari aboard survived. They sealed the breaches with their own bodies, their regenerative abilities letting them survive in vacuum long enough to make repairs. The ship that should have been dead kept fighting. On the ground, Wanshik led mixed-species combat units preparing for possible landing forces. He was a grizzled veteran who had spent 3 months training humans to fight alongside refugees. Now he watched the orbital battle and smiled grimly. "They're not ready for us," he said to his second, a human lieutenant named Minji. "The Concordate fights individuals. We fight as something bigger." In orbit, Carthan watched his perfect formations fall apart. His ships were individually superior, with better weapons and stronger shields. But they fought alone, each vessel operating independently. The human ships fought together, linked in ways that made them more than the sum of their parts. An engineer named Minji, working on Ganymede Station, had spent months developing hybrid technology. Human designs enhanced by refugee innovations. Now those designs proved their worth. A human frigate with Thren-enhanced engines could jump in and out of combat, faster than concordate ships could track. A destroyer with Yulkar coordination systems never wasted a shot. Fighters with Pixan navigation could dogfight through debris fields that should have been impossible to navigate. And the Velnari medical bays meant human crews could survive injuries that would have killed them. Ships kept fighting long after they should have been hulks. "Fall back," Carthan ordered. "Reform it." A human battleship appeared out of nowhere, quantum jump engines modified by Thren calculations. It fired at point-blank range into Carthan's flagship. Shields held, but barely. "How did they—" his tactical officer started. "They calculated our retreat pattern," Carthan realized with growing horror. "They're thinking faster than we are." It wasn't true exactly. Individually, the Thren thought slowly, but working with human intuition and quantum processors, they could predict battle flow in ways concordate tactical computers couldn't match. The battle raged for 6 hours. Carthan kept expecting his superior numbers and firepower to turn the tide. It never happened. Every time he adapted, the human alliance adapted faster. Every formation he tried, they countered with something unexpected. Finally, a crazy human freighter captain named Insu led a boarding action. His ship, protected by Velnari hull repair teams, smashed directly into Carthan's flagship. Magnetic clamps locked the vessels together. Wanshik's marines poured through the breach. Humans, Velnari, Yulkar, even tiny Pixan who could slip through ventilation systems. They fought through the flagship's corridors using tactics no Concordate crew had trained for. The Yulkar were devastating in close combat. Their 3-part coordination meant they never left an opening. The Velnari could take hits that would kill anyone else and keep fighting. The Pixan sabotaged systems from inside walls, and the humans tied it all together with adaptability that came from centuries of warfare. Carthan found himself trapped in his own command center. The doors were breached. One chick entered with a mixed squad, weapons raised. "Surrender," one chick said simply. Carthan looked at the human veteran, at the Velnari medic behind him, at the Yulkar warrior trio holding the flanks, at the Pixan scout perched on a console watching everything with large reflective eyes. "You cannot defeat the Concordat," Carthan said. "I am one admiral. They will send more." "Maybe," one chick acknowledged. "Or maybe the galaxy just saw what cooperation can do against domination. Maybe they're realizing they don't have to accept the Concordat's order anymore." Because the battle had been broadcast, not by human choice but by Litharin. The young Kale telepath had used her abilities to hack into Concordat communication networks. Every world in the Concordat had watched the battle. They saw the impossible happen. They saw refugees and humans fighting together with perfect coordination. They saw the mighty Concordat fleet broken by cooperation. More importantly, they saw something they had never seen before. After the battle, when the Concordat forces had surrendered, they saw mercy. One chick didn't execute the prisoners, didn't torture them or parade them as trophies. He treated their wounded, gave them food, and offered them a choice. "You can go back to the Concordat," Daehyun told Carthan via communication link. "Face whatever punishment awaits you for failure. Or you can stay. Request asylum. Join the alliance we're building." "Why would you offer that?" Carthan couldn't comprehend it. "I came to destroy you, and you failed. But you're also a person who was following orders from a system built on genocide. You can keep serving that system, or you can choose differently. That's always the choice. Every person, every moment." Carthan sat in the brig of a human ship surrounded by the refugees he had come to kill. Some of them were Velnari who his forces had nearly exterminated. Some were Thren his civilization had called obsolete. But none of them looked at him with hatred. Just expectation, waiting to see what he would choose. On Concordat worlds, riots began. The worker species, the ones who did the real labor that kept the Empire functioning, started asking questions. If the refugees could fight back, why couldn't they? If humans could show mercy to their enemies, what did that say about the Concordat's cruelty? A young Kale telepath named Litharin appeared on broadcasts across the Concordat. "I defected because I couldn't stand the evil anymore. But now I see it's not just about leaving. It's about building something better. The humans aren't perfect, but they're trying." That's more than the Concordat ever did. The Kale hierarchy split. Younger telepaths, disgusted by what they learned of their own history, broke away. The Vexistorian Empire retreated into its own space, unwilling to risk further humiliation. Dozens of other species began internal debates about whether they wanted to remain part of the Concordat. The mighty empire that had ruled for millions of years began to fracture. Not because humans defeated them militarily. Humanity's fleet was still tiny, their territory still small, but they had proven something the galaxy had forgotten was possible. Different species could work together, could be stronger together, could choose cooperation over domination. On Earth, Young-Soo watched the battle broadcasts in the aftermath. His movement fell apart as people saw what mixed-species crews had accomplished. He appeared on one final broadcast, his voice quiet. "I was wrong," he admitted. "I thought protecting humanity meant keeping everyone else out. But maybe protecting humanity means being the kind of species worth protecting. The kind that helps instead of hurts. That includes instead of excludes." It wasn't a complete conversion. Many still feared the refugees, still wanted humanity to focus on its own interests. But the balance had shifted. Ambassador Jiwoo returned to Earth to a hero's welcome. She had stood before the Concordat Council and exposed their crimes. Now she advocated for something new. "We can't go back to how things were," she told Earth's government. "The old order is dying. We can either scramble for scraps of the Concordat's power, or we can build something better, an alliance based on mutual benefit, not domination. A civilization built on including the discarded, not casting them aside." The vote was close. But humanity chose the harder path. They would keep the door open. Keep accepting refugees. Keep building mixed communities. Not because it was easy or profitable. Ambassador Jiwoo stood before the Concordat Council and broadcast Hana's evidence to every screen in the chamber. The genetic records filled holographic displays 3 stories tall. The historical fragments spoke in dead languages, translated by quantum processors. The architectural ruins showed cities that had been systematically erased from records. The council chamber erupted in chaos. Representatives from 100 species shouted in a dozen languages. Some demanded Jiwoo's arrest. Others sat in stunned silence as they saw proof of genocides committed against their own species millions of years ago. Vextor Primus Carthan, the reptilian admiral commanding the Concordate's military forces, rose from his seat. His scales gleamed under the chamber lights, deep red like old blood. These records are fabricated. Human lies designed to weaken the Concordate's unity. Fabricated? Jiwoo kept her voice steady even though her hands were shaking. These came from your own genetic archives. Your own historical databases. You kept the evidence of your crimes, probably because you were proud of them. We preserved order. We created stability. Carthan's voice was cold. The Concordate has maintained peace for millions of years. That peace required difficult choices. You call genocide a difficult choice? We call it necessary evolution. Species that could not meet our standards were removed. It made the galaxy stronger. Jiwoo looked at him with disgust. You're not even denying it. Why should I? The weak were culled. The impure were cleansed. This is the foundation of everything the Concordate has built. Carthan turned to address the full council. And now humans, these upstart primitives who barely left their own system a century ago, dare to judge us? They harbor our rejects and call it morality? A Kale telepath named Litharin spoke up. She was young, her telepathic organs still showing the blue glow of adolescence. But if the refugees are survivors of cleansing, doesn't that make them evidence of our crimes? Shouldn't we? Silence, an elder Kale hissed. You speak out of turn. But Litharin had given voice to what many were thinking. The lower caste species, the workers and builders and farmers who formed the foundation of the Concordate, began to whisper among themselves. If their histories had been erased, what else didn't they know? Carthan saw the danger immediately. Enough debate. The humans have 90 days to surrender all refugees or face military consequences. This council is adjourned. Jiwoo watched them file out, some angry, some thoughtful, all troubled. She had thrown a stone into a pond. The ripples were spreading. Back on Earth, the broadcast caused similar chaos. Young-Su's movement fractured. Some of his followers abandoned him, horrified by the evidence of genocide. Others doubled down, arguing that humanity couldn't afford to be the galaxy's conscience even if the Concordate was evil. The Earth government held emergency sessions. Representatives shouted at each other for days. Finally, they reached a compromise that satisfied no one. They would not forcibly return the refugees, but they would not actively accept more either. Each colony could decide for itself. It was weak, but it gave people like Bam and Daehyun room to operate. Carthan deployed his fleet. 300 warships formed a blockade around human space. Nothing in, nothing out. Within weeks, the effects started to show. Medical supplies ran low. Rare earth elements needed for life support systems stopped arriving. Colonies that depended on imported food began to ration. They're trying to starve us into compliance, Taemin said, studying the blockade formations. Daehyun nodded. They were in the command center with Commander Hyunwoo, who had been called in to assess humanity's military options. Hyunwoo was a tactical genius, but even he looked worried. We have maybe 60 combat-capable ships, Hyunwoo said. They have 300. And those are just the ones we can see. The Concordate could deploy thousands if they wanted. Can we fight? We can die gloriously. Is that what you're asking? Daehyun stared at the tactical display. The Concordate ships formed a perfect grid around human space, each vessel supporting the others. It was the blockade of an empire that had been waging war for millions of years against an upstart species that had barely unified its own planet. On New Sol, Bam watched her food stores dwindle. The colony could survive on what they grew, but other colonies weren't so lucky. New Terra depended on imported medicine. New Beijing needed recycling equipment they couldn't manufacture locally. The blockade was a slow strangling, but something was happening in the mixed communities. Something Carthan hadn't anticipated. A teenage Velnari girl named Su Jin, who had been born on one of the fleeing refugee ships and raised on New Sol, asked to address Earth's government. She was 16, caught between two species belonging fully to neither. They let her speak via hologram. Her image appeared in the council chamber. young and nervous but determined. My name is Sujin. I don't have a species anymore, not really. My people are dead, but I'm not sad because I found something better. I found humans who treated me like I mattered, who taught me their language and let me teach them mine, who didn't save me because I was useful. They saved me because it was right. She paused, collecting her thoughts. Around the chamber, representatives listened. Now you want to give up? Send us back? You didn't fight the Concordat when they were just mean. You're not going to fight them now that you know they're murderers? That doesn't make sense. You're humans. You're supposed to be stubborn. You're supposed to do the right thing even when it's hard. Young Sue stood up. Young lady, you don't understand the situation. We're trying to survive. No, you're trying to be comfortable. Survival is what my people did. We lived in ships with no heat, eating food that wasn't meant for us, not knowing if we'd find help or just die in space. That's survival. You're just scared. We have billions of people to protect. Then protect them by being worth protecting. My guardian, she's a human farmer. She says her grandmother was a refugee too. Came on a boat with nothing. People turned her away again and again. But one place said yes. That place was worth protecting because it had something special. Compassion. Are you going to throw that away? The speech went viral. Sujin became a symbol, her young face appearing on broadcast across human space. Some people hated her, called her a propaganda tool, but many others saw a kid who had grown up in exile asking the adults to be brave. In the blockade, Litharin watched the broadcast on her ship. She was a junior officer, barely noticed by her superiors, but she was a telepath, and she could sense the doubts rippling through the Concordat forces. Many of the lower caste species didn't want to fight this war. They were beginning to ask questions about their own histories. She made a decision that would change everything. Late one night, she copied encrypted files from her ship's database. Evidence of ongoing cleansing operations. Lists of species marked for elimination. Communication between Concordat leaders discussing which populations to erase next. Then she stole a shuttle and ran for human space. Carthan's forces tried to stop her, but she used her telepathic abilities to confuse pursuit ships. She broadcast continuously as she fled. I am Kale Litharin. I am defecting to the humans. I carry evidence of current genocide plans. The Concordat isn't just hiding past crimes. They're planning future ones. She barely made it to Ganymede Station. Her shuttle was shot to pieces, held together by emergency fields. But the data she carried was intact. Daehyun met her in the docking bay. She was young, maybe the Kale equivalent of 20 years old. Her telepathic organs pulsed with exhaustion. Why? He asked simply. Because I read the minds of our leaders. I felt what they really think. They don't see other species as people. They see them as problems to be managed or eliminated. I felt their joy when they talked about cleansing operations. She looked at him with eyes that had seen too much. I couldn't be part of that anymore. I'd rather die with the humans than live with monsters. The evidence she brought was damning. The Concordat wasn't just defending old genocides. They were actively planning new ones. 17 species were on the elimination list. Not for being impure or slow or strange. For having resources the Concordat wanted. For occupying space the Concordat needed. For existing, Hyunwoo studied the tactical data Litharin had stolen. Fleet positions, supply lines, communication protocols. He started to smile. What are you seeing? Daehyun asked. An empire that's been unchallenged for too long. They're arrogant. Their formations are perfect for intimidation but weak for actual combat. They assume nobody will fight back. Hyunwoo's smile grew wider. They're about to learn they're wrong. Carthan received reports of Litharin's defection and didn't seem concerned. One young telepath couldn't change anything. The humans were still trapped, still weak, still doomed. He decided to make an example. He chose New Seoul as his target. It had the most refugees, the most vocal support for the sanctuary movement. Destroying it would break human resistance. His fleet moved into position. 300 ships against a single agricultural colony. It should have been easy. Carr then broadcast to the colony. Surrender all refugees and you will be spared. Resist and we will demonstrate what happens to those who defy the Concordat. Bomb's response was broadcast across the galaxy. Come and try. We'll show you what happens when you threaten our friends. The Battle of Haven's Gate was about to begin. The ships kept coming. 3 weeks after the Velnari arrived, a massive, slow-moving vessel appeared at the edge of human space. It took them 4 days just to reach Ganymede Station. When they finally docked, Daehyun understood why. The Thren were made of living crystal. They moved like statues coming to life, each gesture taking long seconds to complete. Their leader, Threlnak, took nearly 10 minutes just to walk from his ship to the meeting room. But when he spoke, his voice resonated like music through stone. "We think too slowly for the Concordat," Threlnak explained. Each word came after a pause, as if he was carefully choosing every syllable. They made efficiency quotas, production schedules. We could not keep up, so they declared us obsolete. There were 800 Thren. They had traveled for 3 years at sublight speed, too slow for the Concordat's hyperspace lanes, too slow for everything the galaxy valued. "What can you do?" Hannah asked. She had become the unofficial liaison with refugee species, fascinated by each new arrival. Threlnak was quiet for a full minute. "Then we see patterns. In numbers. In quantum probabilities. What takes your computers hours, we understand in moments. We just need time to speak it." Before Daehyun could process this, Taemin called him to the command center. 2 more ships had arrived. The Yulkar came in family units of 3. Each trio bonded in ways that human psychology couldn't quite explain. They had been exiled because their 3-gender family structure violated Concordat social codes. The Pixen arrived in a swarm of tiny ships. They stood no taller than a human's knee, with reflective skin that bent light around them. Their homeworld had been strip-mined by Concordat corporations. Left with nothing, they had become nomadic. The Concordat called them parasites and refused them docking rights anywhere. Within 2 months, Ganymede Station was overwhelmed. Daehyun had to open emergency shelters in the cargo bays. Food supplies ran low. The station's life support system strained under the load, and Earth was getting angry. Ambassador Ji-woo called from the Concordat council chambers. Her face on the screen looked exhausted. "Daehyun, you need to stop accepting refugees. The Concordat is threatening real consequences now. They've closed 3 trade routes. Our merchant ships are being detained for inspections that take weeks. What am I supposed to do? Turn them away?" "Yes, if it means protecting humanity's interests." Ji-woo rubbed her temples. "I spent 6 hours today being lectured about genetic purity and cultural integrity. They're calling us genetic refuse collectors. They're saying we're building an army of outcasts." "An army?" Daehyun almost laughed. "These people can barely feed themselves. That's not what Earth sees. Have you watched the news?" He hadn't. He had been too busy managing the crisis. Ji-woo sent him clips. A politician named Young-soo was giving speeches about protecting humanity first, about not sacrificing human interests for aliens nobody wanted. The speeches were getting popular. "We need to think about our own people," Young-soo said on one broadcast. "These refugees bring nothing but problems. The galaxy rejected them for good reasons. Why should we suffer for their failures?" Daehyun felt sick watching it. But he also saw the comments, the approval ratings. Young-soo was saying what many humans were thinking. On New Sol, a farming colony on the edge of human space, a woman named Bomb watched the same broadcasts. She was a colony administrator, responsible for a population of 50,000 humans growing crops on a terraformed world. Her people were mostly immigrants themselves, refugees from Earth's overcrowded cities seeking new starts. Bomb made a decision. She sent a message directly to Ganymede Station. "Send us refugees," her message said. "We have space. We have work. We have food. Send us the Pixen. They can see gravitational waves, yes? They can help us predict weather patterns. Send us the Thren. Our quantum computing arrays need programming. Send us anyone who needs a home." Daehyun stared at the message for a long time. Then he called her. Bomb's face appeared on screen. She was in her 40s with smile lines around her eyes and dirt under her fingernails. "Did you get my message? Are you serious?" "Completely. Look, Captain, my grandparents were boat people. They fled a war with nothing. Other countries turned them away again and again until one finally said yes. I exist because someone chose compassion over convenience." She leaned closer to the camera. "These refugees, they have skills, abilities, things we can learn from." Why is everyone treating this like charity? It's opportunity. The Concordat can complain all they want. We're on the frontier. It takes them months to even send messages out here. By the time they organize any real response, we'll have integrated communities. We'll have proven it works. Daehyun felt something like hope for the first time in weeks. "I'll start making arrangements." Over the next month, Bomb's colony ship made 3 trips to Ganymede Station. Each time it left full of refugees and supplies. The Pixin went first, their tiny forms fitting easily in the cargo holds. Then families of Yulkar, their three-part bonds making them natural farmers. Finally, a group of Thren who moved slowly but thought brilliantly. Hana went with them, unable to resist the chance to study interspecies cooperation firsthand. She sent regular reports back to Daehyun. The first weeks were chaos. The Pixin accidentally knocked over irrigation systems they couldn't see clearly. The Thren took so long to give instructions that crops nearly died waiting. The Yulkar's communication style confused everyone. But slowly, things changed. The Pixin, who could see gravity, detected underground water sources nobody knew existed. The Thren optimized growing schedules using quantum probability, increasing yields by 40%. The Yulkar's triple bonds created work crews that never broke down or fought, their natural harmony spreading to mixed teams. Hana's reports grew excited. "They're not just surviving together," she wrote. "They're thriving. A human working with a Pixin navigator can pilot through asteroid fields impossible for either alone. Thren predictions combined with human intuition creates better planning than either could manage separately. The Yulkar teach human families about cooperation that goes beyond words." She recorded interviews. A human farmer named Junho said, "I thought we were doing them a favor. Turns out they're doing us one. My yields are up, my costs are down, and I learned things about quantum agriculture I didn't know were possible." A Velnari doctor worked in the colony's hospital. Her regenerative medicine knowledge saved 3 human children who would have died from a plague outbreak. She taught human doctors techniques that seemed like magic. Bomb sent these stories everywhere, not as propaganda but as evidence. She appeared on news broadcasts arguing passionately. "We were refugees once, all of us. Our ancestors crossed oceans, deserts, and eventually space looking for better lives. People said they were criminals, parasites, worthless, but they built everything we have. These refugees are the same. They're not broken. They're just different," the message spread. Other colonies, inspired by New Soul's example, volunteered to take refugees. Not all of them. Not even most. But enough. Young-Soo pushed back harder. His movement grew. "Earth First rallies filled stadiums. We barely have enough for ourselves," he argued. "Every resource we give to refugees is stolen from human children. From our future." The debate raged through human space. Families divided. Friends argued. Some called it humanity's finest moment. Others called it suicide. Then Hana made a discovery. She was analyzing genetic samples from all the refugee species, comparing them to concordant databases that a freighter captain named In-Soo had stolen during a supply run. In-Soo was a smuggler who hated the concordant on principle and took pleasure in poking holes in their blockade. What Hana found changed everything. She called Daehyun, her hands shaking. "The concordant's history is a lie. All of it." "What do you mean?" "They claim to be thousands of years old. They're millions of years old. And every species in the concordant, every single one, was purified at some point. They systematically exterminated the diverse populations within each species, keeping only the ones they deemed acceptable." Daehyun felt cold. "You're saying the refugees aren't defective?" "They're survivors. The concordant has been committing genocide for millions of years, wiping out anyone who reminds them of their own diverse origins. They maintain power by erasing difference. Can you prove this?" "I have genetic records. Historical fragments. Architectural evidence of extinct civilizations. It's all here. The concordant isn't protecting purity. They're hiding a mountain of corpses." Daehyun looked at the data. Then he looked at Ganymede Station, full of refugees. Full of the concordant's living conscience, the ones who survived the erasure. "Get this to Ambassador Jiwoo," he said quietly, "and to every news service that will listen. It's time the galaxy knew the truth." Young-Soo could argue about resources and priorities, but he couldn't argue with genocide. The refugees weren't charity cases or burdens. They were the evidence of the concordant's greatest crime. The alarm screamed through Ganymede Station at 3 a.m. Captain Daehyun rolled out of bed and grabbed his uniform. Another ship, another crisis. He had been running this place for 5 years now, and the emergencies never stopped. The control room buzzed with activity when he arrived. Taemin, his second officer, pointed at the main screen. A damaged vessel tumbled through space, barely holding together. Parts of its hull were missing. Fires flickered in the exposed sections. "They're requesting emergency docking," Taemin said. His voice was flat. No identification codes. The ship design doesn't match anything in our database. Daehyun studied the wreckage. Whatever had happened to that ship, it was bad. Really bad. Clear Bay 7. Get medical teams ready. Sir, we don't know who they are. They're dying. That's all I need to know. The ship barely made it through the docking sequence. When the bay doors closed and atmosphere flooded in, Daehyun was already there with his team. The ship's hatch opened with a hiss of stale air. The smell hit him first. Blood, chemicals, and something else he couldn't identify. They came out slowly. Tall figures, taller than humans, with pale blue skin that seemed to shimmer in the station lights. Their faces were almost human, but not quite. Too many angles, eyes too large. They moved like people who had forgotten how to hope. An old female stepped forward first. She wore robes that might have been beautiful once. Now they were torn and stained. She looked at Daehyun with eyes that had seen too much. "I am Venlas," she said in perfect English. The translator implant in her neck glowed faintly. "We are Velnari. We have nowhere else to go." Behind her, more emerged. Daehyun counted them. 3,000, maybe less. Many were injured. Some were carried by others. Children clung to adults, silent and wide-eyed. "Get them to medical," Daehyun ordered. His team moved forward, helping the refugees. Some of the Velnari flinched at first contact, then relaxed when they realized the humans meant no harm. Later that day, Daehyun sat across from Venlas in the station's medical center. A young human scientist named Hana was there too, running scans and tests. She couldn't hide her excitement at meeting a new species. Daehyun envied her ability to see wonder instead of complications. "Tell me what happened," Daehyun said gently. Venlas was quiet for a long moment. Her hand shook slightly. "We were cast aside. That is what happened. The Galactic Concordat discovered something in our DNA. Something old. Traces of another species mixed with ours from thousands of years ago. Mixed how? We do not know the full story. But long ago, another species called the Morathi lived near our worlds. Somehow, somewhere, our ancestors mixed. Just a little. Just enough that it shows in our genes." Hana looked up from her scanner. "That's incredible. Interspecies DNA transfer is extremely rare." "The Concordat did not think it was incredible," Venlas said bitterly. "They called us contaminated, impure. They said we violated the genetic purity laws. Laws we did not even know existed until they came to our worlds with their warships." Daehyun felt something cold settle in his stomach. "What did they do?" "They destroyed everything. Our cities, our farms, our libraries. They gave us a choice. Submit to genetic cleansing, which would kill us, or leave forever." Venlas's voice cracked. "We are all that remains of 15 billion Velnari." The number hit Daehyun like a punch. 15 billion, reduced to 3,000. He thought of Earth's history, of genocides and exiles, of people forced from their homes for being different. "The Morathi," Hana asked quietly. "What happened to them?" "The Concordat exterminated them. 10,000 years ago. Every last one. That is why they hate us. We are proof of their ancient crime. Living evidence they want erased." Taemin burst into the room, his face red. "Sir, we have a problem. A big one." He thrust a tablet at Daehyun. "Message from the Concordat. They're demanding we surrender the Velnari immediately." Daehyun read the message. It was cold and formal. "Return the refugees or face severe consequences. Trade sanctions, blockades, possible military action." Humanity was young in the galactic community. Weak and vulnerable. They couldn't afford to make enemies. "They will kill us if you send us back," Venlas said simply. "Not quickly. They will make an example of us." "We can't fight the Concordat," Taemin argued. "We're barely holding our own territory. If they cut off our trade routes, our colonies will starve. So we just hand them over." Daehyun snapped. "Send them to their deaths?" "I'm saying we have to think about our own people first." Daehyun looked at Venlas. She wasn't begging. She wasn't crying. She just sat there with the dignity of someone who had already lost everything and had nothing left to lose. Hana spoke up. "Sir, I've finished the preliminary scans. The Concordat is lying." Both men turned to her. She pulled up data on her screen, excited despite the tension. "The Velnari aren't contaminated. They're enhanced. This Morathi DNA, it gives them incredible regenerative abilities. Look at these cellular structures. They can heal from injuries that would kill most species. Their immune systems are extraordinary." "What are you saying?" Daehyun asked. "I'm saying the Concordat didn't exile them for being impure. They exiled them for being better, and for being a reminder of a genocide the Concordat wants everyone to forget. The room fell silent. Daehyun stood and walked to the window. Outside, he could see Jupiter's massive bulk filling half the sky. Ganymede Station had been built as a waypoint, then became a refugee processing center when Earth started accepting displaced populations from across human space. He had seen thousands of refugees pass through, humans fleeing failed colonies, survivors of disasters, people looking for a new start. He thought about his grandmother. She had fled a war on Earth when she was young, crossed an ocean with nothing but hope. She told him stories about camps and closed borders and people who looked away rather than help. "We grant them asylum," he said finally. "Sir," Taman started. "Temporary asylum, while we review their case. That's within our authority as a refugee station. The Concordat can complain to Earth if they want. Let the politicians handle the diplomacy." "They'll crucify you for this decision," Taman warned. "Probably." Daehyun turned back to Venlas. "You and your people can stay. We'll figure out the rest later." For the first time, something like hope flickered in the old woman's eyes. "Why?" she whispered. "Why help us?" "You do not know us." Daehyun thought about his grandmother again, about camps and borders and people who looked away. "Because someone has to," he said simply, "and it might as well be us." Over the next week, the Velnari settled into Ganymede Station. They were quiet, careful not to take up too much space or cause trouble. Hana spent hours with them, learning their language and culture. Slowly, the refugees began to relax. The children were the first to laugh again, small sounds at first, quickly hushed by worried parents, but gradually more freely. Daehyun watched from his office as a Velnari child played with a human child in the station's garden. Different species, different worlds, but kids were kids everywhere. His console beeped. Another message from the Concordat. More threats, more demands, but also something else. News was spreading through quantum channels. Other species were hearing about the Velnari, about humanity's decision, and they were coming. More ships appeared on the long-range scanners. More refugees, more outcasts, more unwanted populations fleeing persecution, all heading toward human space. Taman appeared beside him. "Sir, we have a situation developing." "I know," Daehyun said quietly. "I know." He had opened a door. Now he had to decide if he was brave enough to keep it open.